Nobody walks out on Don Halpern, but I did, and I wasn't coming back empty-handed. My name's Ray Larkin. I'm 47 years old, and up until that day I'd spent most of my adult life believing hard work spoke for itself. I lived in Columbus, Ohio, had 2 decades in the logistics sector, and thought I finally had my shot at something big. 8 months I poured into a proposal that could overhaul routing efficiency for Halpern Global Logistics, one of the biggest players in North America. It would have saved them over $3 million a year. Didn't matter. That morning, in a conference room on the 33rd floor of their downtown Chicago headquarters, I got demolished in front of 32 people, all suits, all senior, all watching. Don Halpern, the man himself, held my pitch between 2 fingers like it was a cocktail napkin with gum stuck to it. He didn't even look at it. "This is embarrassing," he said. Then he tore it in half and let it flutter onto the table. "You're not cut out for high-stakes operations, Ray." No one moved, not a breath, not a sip of water. They just watched me sit there like a fool, like I'd shown up to a black tie gala in overalls. I felt my ears burn, but I kept my face still. My hands were flat on the table, and I could hear the blood thumping in them. I didn't look at the papers, just stared back at Don, straight into those smug, glassy eyes. "You're probably right, sir," I said, standing up. "I'm not in your league." He smirked like he'd just scored a touchdown, like he thought I'd finally accepted my place. But I wasn't broken. I wasn't even angry. Not yet. I was calm. I straightened my jacket, nodded at the others, and walked out of the room. Not a word. Not a scene. Just gone. I rode the elevator down with 3 people from his strategy team. Nobody made eye contact. One guy looked like he wanted to, but he blinked and stared at the floor instead. Outside, it was cold and loud and smelled like cab exhaust. I walked 2 blocks to the parking garage and climbed into my truck. Sat there, didn't turn the engine on, didn't even move. I just sat there with my hands on the wheel, staring at the wall in front of me like it could give me an answer. 8 months. Don hadn't even read the damn thing. He didn't tear up the numbers. He tore up me, and I'd taken it, kept my mouth shut, walked out with dignity, thought that was the smart move. But the thing is, Don Halpern didn't just toss out a proposal. He tried to erase me, and what he didn't know, what he couldn't have known, was just how deep his reach already ran, how many people he'd hurt, how much damage he'd done long before I ever stepped into that boardroom. He thought I'd walk away and disappear. But Don had made a mistake. He picked the wrong man to humiliate. I wasn't angry yet. Not really. I was more tired. Tired of guys like Don. Tired of the way they smiled while they broke you down. Tired of how they built these glass towers off the backs of other people's labor, other people's ideas, and then acted like they were gods because they wore Italian shoes and called people champ. I sat in my truck in the underground garage for a long time, an hour, maybe more. I didn't cry, I didn't rage, I didn't punch the steering wheel or throw my coffee at the wall like some movie character. I just sat there, my fingers laced together over the wheel, thinking about how many people I'd seen get crushed by men like Don Halpern. Lyle came to mind first. He was a sales director back when I was cutting my teeth in the Kansas City branch. Honest guy, solid work ethic. Don reassigned him to a dead zone out west, a region with 0 growth, no infrastructure, and no shot. Set him up to fail so he could restructure and look decisive. Lyle lost the job, then his house. His wife filed for divorce 6 months later. I remember him telling me, Don said it was just business, like I should thank him for the opportunity. Then there was Cassie, one of the smartest systems analysts I ever worked with. She built a proprietary logistics model. Lean, fast, absolutely genius. Don borrowed it during a strategy session, then presented it as part of his executive vision. A week later, he called her too green during a quarterly town hall and passed her up for a promotion she'd earned twice over. She left the industry altogether, last I heard. That's what Don did. He didn't just fire people, he erased them, took their work, stripped their names, rewrote the history, and then told the story with himself as the hero. And now he'd tried to erase me. That's when the fog lifted. That's when something sharp cut through the heaviness in my chest. This wasn't about the deal. It was never about the proposal or the numbers or the execution plan. Don hadn't even looked at it. What he tore in half wasn't just paper. It was me, my time, my reputation, my place. It wasn't personal. Not to him. It never was. But to me, it had become something else entirely. This was about the game. I wasn't going to beat Don Holpern in a boardroom. He owned those spaces. He'd stacked the rooms with people who owed him favors or feared him too much to speak up. That conference table, that wasn't an arena, it was a stage. And he'd written the whole script. No, if I wanted to beat Don, I had to change the venue. I had to find the crack in his armor, and I knew exactly where to start looking. The tech I had pitched, the very overhaul that would have saved him $3.2 million in operating costs. It wasn't mine, not entirely. It belonged to a man named Jared Costa, a quiet systems engineer, brilliant out overlooked, and one of the few people in this business who actually cared about what logistics meant, about what it could do if it wasn't just used for profit margins. I'd met him 2 years earlier. We'd talked shop over coffee, bonded over real-world logistics failures and the ways to fix them. I believed in him. Back then, I told him I'd help get his work noticed. And Don? Don had already tried to steal it once. I didn't know how yet, not the whole picture, but I had a feeling Jared did. And if he was still the man I remembered, then he wouldn't have forgotten what Don tried to do to him either. It was time to make a call. I met Jared Costa at a conference in St. Louis about 2 years back. Most people were busy glad-handing vendors and schmoozing with middle managers. I was just looking for someone who gave a damn about the work. I found him leaning over a laptop at a folding table, showing a logistics optimization model to anyone who'd listen. Most didn't. I did. He wasn't slick. No PowerPoint, just a whiteboard, a beat-up ThinkPad, and a map of Midwestern transport corridors that had more red lines than a cardiac scan. But his system worked. I could see it in 10 minutes flat. He wasn't pitching it for money. He was trying to solve a real problem. Medical supply routes, insulin, biologics, plasma units. His daughter, he told me later, had a rare autoimmune disease that required refrigerated shipments twice a week. One late delivery could mean a trip to the ER. He built the model for her. We kept in touch after that. Shared notes, swapped data sets. I pitched his model twice, once to a regional firm, once to Halpern. He told me he wasn't ready to license it. I respected that. So, when I called him the day after Don tore my proposal in half, he answered on the second ring. "Ray," he said, "I heard." Of course he had. Word traveled fast in this industry, especially when someone got humiliated in front of 36 executives. "I need to talk," I said, in person. He didn't ask questions, just said, "You free tonight?" We met at a diner off I-88, same place we'd met a few times before. I slid into the booth across from him. He looked tired, worn, older than the last time I saw him. His coffee was half gone before I even ordered. "I pitched the model," I told him. "Your model. I tried to give you credit in the deck. I told them you weren't ready to sell, but I still believed in it, thought it could help." He nodded. "I figured you might. I'm not mad." I took a breath. Don Halpern shredded it, called it embarrassing, told me I wasn't cut out for high-stakes ops. Jared didn't flinch. He just stared at the coffee like it might tell him something. "Not surprised," he said. Then he leaned back and rubbed his eyes. "He came at me 6 months ago," he said. "Wanted to license the tech under a special advisory agreement. No details, just a handshake deal and a bunch of vague promises about exposure and scale. I didn't say anything. Then he offered me a fake job," Jared went on. "VP of Systems Innovation, total fiction. No staff, no budget, no authority, but full IP control. I'd have to hand over the source code. Forever." "And you didn't?" He shook his head. "I got close. He made it sound like if I didn't, I'd run into regulatory snags, FDA compliance stuff, HIPAA audits, things that could stall my daughter's treatment pipeline. He didn't say it outright. He didn't have to." "Jesus, yeah?" We sat in silence for a while. Then I said, "He's done this to people before. Not just you, not just me." Jared looked up. "You want to go after him? Not just stop him, expose him, flip the table, show the world who he really is." Jared sat with that for a long moment, then he nodded once. "What do you need from me?" Everything, I said. Whatever he sent you. Emails, contracts, texts, any version of the model. I need to rebuild the timeline. I need facts. He didn't even blink. I'll pull the files tonight, he said. I looked at him across the booth, this quiet, tired guy with the weight of his daughter's life on his shoulders. And I realized something. Don thought he'd buried every bad story under money and NDAs and legal tricks. But ghosts don't stay buried, and Jared? Jared wasn't the only one with a story. The first person I called was Trevor Price. Trevor used to be a senior VP under Don, one of the only ones who ever dared question his numbers during earnings calls. Smart guy, sharp as hell. He got labeled insubordinate after pointing out discrepancies in a regional growth report that Don had personally signed off on. A week later, he was gone. Restructuring, they said, but everyone knew. He picked up on the second ring. Ray, been a while. I've got something you're going to want to hear. 2 hours later, we were sitting in his home office in Evanston, door locked, blinds drawn. I laid it all out. What Don did to me, to Jared, to Cassie and Lyle. Trevor didn't flinch. He reached into a cabinet, pulled out a slim hard drive. I still have copies, he said. Financials, memos, revisions. Don made to our projected numbers. All the stuff that got buried. My heart jumped. You kept it? I may be a lot of things, he said, but I'm not an idiot. Next was Aaron Barnes, a journalist who once tried to blow Don out of the water with a story on falsified contracts and backdoor dealings. The piece had teeth until Don's legal team filed an injunction so aggressive her outlet pulled the article and put her on ice. She'd been freelance ever since. I sent her a one-line email. What if I could finish your story? She called me 20 minutes later. I've been waiting 3 years, she said. Tell me what you've got. I told her everything. Jared's model, Don's intimidation, my pitch, the meeting, the files Trevor still had. She was quiet for a moment, then, I want to help, but we'll need hard evidence, something irrefutable. We're working on it. By we, I meant the next piece of the puzzle, Miles Kim. Miles was a software architect who built a dispatch algorithm 2 years ago that revolutionized cross-regional delivery coordination. Don had commissioned it, then stripped his name from the patent filing. Miles got a severance check and a signed NDA, but I knew Miles, and I knew he never stopped keeping logs. He met me at a park bench in Oak Brook, wearing a hoodie pulled over his head like a guy about to hand off a flash drive in a spy movie. He didn't smile. I'll give you what I have, he said, but I'm not looking to get blacklisted. You won't, I told him. This isn't about making noise. It's about ending him for good. That was almost true. We were still missing one thing. Then Trevor said something I hadn't considered. We were sitting in his office again, sorting files, when he looked up and said, You know who really hates him? Who? Hannah. His wife? Trevor nodded. She's been trapped in that marriage for years. Quiet. Polished. But I heard her once, during a board retreat, told someone she wishes she could disappear. I'm telling you, she hates him more than any of us. She just can't say it out loud. I didn't love the idea. Involving family, messy, dangerous. But if she knew anything, if she had proof, then this could be the break we needed. I made a donation to her foundation, just a few thousand, enough to catch her attention. 3 days later, she agreed to meet. Private room at a small art gallery in River North. She looked tired, like someone who had learned how to smile through pain. But when I explained what we were doing, when I told her we weren't just trying to block a deal, but to bring everything into the light, her expression changed. You don't know what he's capable of, she said quietly. He doesn't just ruin people, he breaks them. Then, almost as an afterthought, she pulled a small velvet pouch from her bag and handed it to me. Don's been paranoid lately, always talking in his office, thinking the doors are soundproof. I started keeping one of these nearby, just in case. Inside the pouch was a slim digital recorder. I didn't even know if it caught anything, she added. But maybe it helps. I took it with shaking hands. Pressed play right there. Don's voice came through, clear as day. What he said made my stomach turn. We didn't just have stories anymore. We had evidence. The first move had to look like surrender. Jared played it perfectly. called Don's assistant and asked to reschedule the conversation he'd backed out of months ago. Said he'd been reconsidering, that he was tired of being small-time, tired of struggling. Don jumped at it, probably figured he'd finally broken him. They scheduled a private sit-down for the following Thursday, corner office, no paper trail. Think he suspects anything? I asked as we planned the night before. Jared shook his head. He wants to win too badly. Guys like Don only see what they want. Aaron and I worked around the clock in the meantime. Every scrap of evidence we had, Trevor's internal docs, Hannah's audio, Miles's development logs. We organized, time-stamped, and triple-backed up. Aaron built out a full case file, like a prosecutor preparing for trial. This is going to go nuclear, she said, eyes glued to her laptop. Once this goes live, it's not just a story, it's a reckoning. Miles, who barely spoke unless it was code, handed us the linchpin. I made you something, he said one night, sliding a small black box across the table. It looked like a stylus. Sleek, brushed metal, discreet. It records everything, he said. Crystal clear, saves locally and remotely. One push at the top, and it's on. Jared turned it over in his hand, eyebrows raised. You serious? I don't build toys, Miles replied. That pen was going into the room with Don. Thursday morning, I sat across the street from Halpern HQ in a greasy diner with burnt coffee and a clear view of the front entrance. Jared walked in at exactly 10 a.m., cool as a man on his way to lunch. He wore a navy blazer and a blank expression. The pen was in his breast pocket. He didn't look back. I watched him step into the elevator through the glass and disappear behind the brass-paneled doors. Then I just waited. 3 hours. I barely moved. I went through 2 mugs of sludge and half a plate of untouched hash browns. At one point, I found myself gripping the edge of the table so hard my knuckles ached. What if it didn't work? What if Don smelled the setup? What if Jared froze? But just after 1 p.m., he walked back out the front doors, straightened his cuffs like he'd just signed a contract, and crossed the street toward me. He opened the diner door and sat across from me, silent. You okay? I asked. He nodded once. Then he reached into his pocket, pulled out the pen, and placed it on the table. We got it, he said. He didn't smile. He didn't need to. I picked it up like it was made of glass. You sure? Jared leaned in, his voice low. He bragged, laughed, called me a naive little software guy, told me how he was going to patent the tech under a shell company, then license it to his own firm for a premium. Said you were another idiot who didn't understand the game. I sat back in the booth, the weight of it all hitting me at once. And there's more, he added. He admitted to blocking you from jobs, said you made him look bad. He said, and I quote, I made a few calls to make sure Ray couldn't show his face in this town again. I blinked. He hadn't just stolen. He'd sabotaged me. I didn't even know how long it had been going on. Just that every door that slammed in my face this past year suddenly made perfect gut-wrenching sense. We transferred the audio to Erin, who sent it to 3 encrypted locations and flagged the highlights. She listened to the whole thing twice and looked at me like she was staring at live ammunition. This isn't just ego or bullying, she said. This is fraud. This is premeditated corporate theft. If we can verify the patent path he mentioned, he's done. I turned to Jared. You sure you're ready for this? He didn't even blink. He tried to leverage my daughter's health against me. There's no coming back from that. I nodded, gripping the pen again, just to feel it in my hand. We had everything. Now, we just had to pull the trigger. We met in a rented motel room off the interstate, the kind with stiff curtains, a humming wall unit, and a single sad chair bolted to the floor. We needed somewhere quiet, private, cheap, untraceable. The air smelled like lemon cleaner and regret. Erin set up her laptop on the chip dresser, connected the stylus recorder, and hit play. Don's voice filled the room. First came the laughing, that smug, slow drawl I'd heard too many times. Then came the bragging. Naive tech guys, he said. They always think it's about their little invention. I let them feel important, let them think they've got leverage, but if you want to win, you've got to own the infrastructure. You've got to own the rights. Jared sat next to me, jaw clenched so hard I could see the muscle ticking. Then Don dropped the bomb. I'll patent it myself, he said. Push it through a third-party firm. No names attached. By the time anyone realizes what I've done, they'll be suing a ghost. And Ray, that idiot, I've made sure he can't get hired again. All it takes is a few calls to the right people, whisper the word unreliable, and poof, gone. He laughed again, like it was a magic trick. I felt sick. Not angry, not yet. Just gutted, like someone had scooped something out of my chest and left the shell behind. He doesn't just ruin people, Aaron muttered. He builds blueprints for it. We kept listening. Men like that, Don said. They either disappear or they learn who's really in charge. When the audio stopped, no one said a word for a while. Then the door opened. Hannah walked in, wearing a gray coat and carrying nothing but her purse. She nodded at us like she belonged there, then quietly sat on the edge of the bed, arms folded, like she'd done it 1,000 times before. We replayed the recording from the beginning. She didn't speak, didn't flinch, just stared at the wall like she already knew every word. When Don said the part about my career, about disappearing, her eyes welled up. But she still didn't cry. Only after the final laugh faded did she say anything. Now you see, she said softly. He doesn't break people by accident. It's what he lives for. Jared looked over at me. Still want to do this? I nodded. Tomorrow, we bring it all. Aaron started packing up files. We'll need the cloud access, she said to Miles, who was busy copying everything to the secure server. And timestamps. This audio can't just be good. It has to be bulletproof. We'll get it there, he said. Think the SEC will take it seriously? Jared asked. Aaron answered before I could. They already are. There's been a soft investigation underway since last quarter. They just needed a spark. Jared raised his eyebrows. And this? This is napalm. We worked late into the night, cross-referenced every document, filed every version of Jared's source code, outlined a timeline that tied everything together. From the pitch I gave to the internal memos Trevor provided to Don's own words on the recording. Hannah handed over more recordings, conversations from their kitchen, drunken phone calls, all of it dated, labeled, and now safely off-site. When we were finally done, I stepped outside and stood in the parking lot. It was cold, but I didn't care. I stared up at the motel sign, buzzing half-lit, and realized something strange. I wasn't tired anymore. I wasn't even scared. I was ready. Because Don Halpern didn't just burn bridges. He burned people. And for the first time in a long time, we weren't just survivors. We were the spark. At 6:58 a.m., Aaron's fingers hovered over the publish button, like a trigger. You ready? She asked. I nodded once. At 7 a.m., sharp, her expose went live on FreightCor Weekly, the most read trade site in the logistics industry. The headline was brutal, simple, and backed by receipts. Exclusive, CEO tied to fraud, sabotage, and IP theft. New evidence emerges. It took 13 minutes for it to hit the major business feeds. Bloomberg picked it up first. Then Reuters. Then a dozen LinkedIn pundits with supply chain visionary in their bios started chiming in like they had always suspected something was off about Don Halpern. They hadn't. But that didn't matter. Now by 7:45, the story had over 50,000 reads and was trending on X. At 8:03, we sent a secure link with our entire archive. The recordings, internal memos, code logs, doctored financials, everything, to 3 places. The SEC's Regional Enforcement Office, Don's Board of Directors, and their top 5 institutional investors, all within 60 seconds of each other. We didn't just send the files. We included a full breakdown, a timeline, and a curated index that showed exactly where to look, what Don had said, what he'd done, and how it connected to existing compliance violations. Aaron's journalistic instincts made sure the tone was matter of fact, not dramatic. It didn't need drama. The truth was enough. At 9:15, one of the board members replied directly. Just 3 words. We need to talk. By 9:40, Don's phone was blowing up. I knew this because his assistant, Cheryl, who I'd always suspected was better than the job she had, texted me from a burner number. Phones won't stop. He's screaming in the hallway. Something broke. Good. By 10:20, the firm's legal team requested a hold on their upcoming IPO, citing unexpected internal developments. They didn't say Don's name, they didn't have to. And then came step 3. At 11 a.m., on the dot, Hannah Halpern stood behind a podium at an Arts Foundation luncheon, press invited, cameras rolling, and made her move. She didn't accuse anyone. She didn't name names. What she did do was announce a new initiative through her foundation, a multi-million-dollar grant program to support whistleblowers, especially those silenced or threatened within corporate hierarchies. She told a story about silence, about control, about the damage done by unchecked power. And though she never said the words abuse or Don, every person in the room knew. That video hit social media within the hour. By noon, the empire was burning. I walked through the front doors of Halpern Logistics at 12:05 p.m. Nobody stopped me. The receptionist looked like she'd seen a ghost. I nodded politely, stepped into the elevator, and pressed the button for the top floor. I sat in Don's office, in the same chair he'd tossed my proposal on 6 weeks earlier. This time, I didn't bring a folder. This time, I brought silence. Outside the glass walls, the building buzzed like a kicked anthill. Suits on phones, assistants whispering, someone from HR crying in the corner. Inside, I waited. Don didn't know I was there yet. He was still in a conference room with the board. I imagined how that conversation was going. The same smug tone, the same empty defenses, until someone pressed play on the audio of him talking about ghost patents and destroying people's careers like it was a chess move. I leaned back, folded my hands, and stared out the window. Down below, people kept moving. Trucks lined up at the docks. Forklifts zipped in and out of shadows. The company would survive. But Don wouldn't. For once in his life, he had no one left to intimidate. No fall guy to blame, no woman to silence, no assistant to fix the fallout, just the truth. And me, waiting in his chair. It was almost poetic. Almost. Don stormed into the office like a man trying to outrun a fire. He started himself. The glass door slammed open so hard it bounced against the stopper. His face was red. Not angry red, cornered red. His tie was crooked, and his jacket hung off one shoulder like he'd gotten into a fight with it halfway down the hall. When he saw me sitting in his chair, one foot casually resting on his polished credenza, he froze. "You've got 10 seconds to get out," he snapped. I didn't move. "Nah, I'm good right here." His eyes darted around the office like he was looking for backup, like someone was going to come in and haul me out. But no one came. It was just us now. "It's over, Don," I said. "You're done. They've got everything." He barked a laugh, but it cracked halfway through. "You don't know what you've done. You think that puff piece and some doctored audio changes anything?" "I think it changes everything," I said calmly. "And it's not just audio. It's financial records, source code, a signed statement from your wife, 2 internal whistleblowers, and a pending investigation from the SEC. He stepped toward me, chest puffed, that old bluster kicking in. "You're a nobody, Ray. You don't have the clout to bring me down. You couldn't even survive a conference room. You think the board cares about your little pity parade?" I stood up slowly. "They care now. You think I haven't seen crap like this before? Stories, leaks, people who get in over their heads and think they're crusaders? You're not special. You're just another guy with a grudge." I shook my head. "No, I'm a guy you shouldn't have underestimated. You didn't just humiliate me, Don. You targeted me. You made sure I couldn't get hired again. You played puppet master behind my back for over a year." He didn't deny it, he just narrowed his eyes. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out a flash drive, held it up between 2 fingers. The same way he once held my proposal. "You want to know what sealed it?" I asked. "The recording. The one where you called me an idiot, said you'd ghost patent Jared's work, and bragged about making people disappear. That's what broke it open. That's what made people finally see you." His mouth opened, but nothing came out. He took a shaky step toward me. "You smug little..." I pointed toward the ceiling. He paused. "Your cameras," I said. "They're still rolling. You're on your own footage right now." His shoulders dropped like a scaffold giving out. I swear I could hear the air leak out of him. He sat down slowly, like the weight of it all had just caught up. He looked around the room, the corner office, the skyline view, the awards on the shelves, the empty brandy decanter, and finally he looked at me like he actually saw me for the first time. "You did all this because of your feelings," he said. His voice was flat now, hollow. I leaned against the edge of his desk. "No, Don. I did it because you've left wreckage everywhere. Lyle, Cassie, Jared, Hannah, Trevor, me. You ruined people, and you've gotten away with it for years." He didn't argue. I didn't expect him to. This was always going to catch up to you, I said. You just didn't think it would be from someone like me. He looked down at his hands, then rubbed his face. What happens now? The board votes. Emergency session. They've seen the evidence. They're not going to protect you. He chuckled weakly. You think I'll go to jail? I didn't answer. Let that one hang. Instead, I picked up my coat and turned toward the door. I walked out of this office once already, Don. Back then, it was my name they were laughing at, my work getting torn in half. He didn't say a word. I opened the door, glanced over my shoulder. This time, it's your life falling apart. I'm just the guy walking out calmly. Then I left. The hallway outside was quiet. No one met my eyes, and somewhere behind me, a man who once ran a $900 million empire sat in silence, finally out of moves. Don was forced to resign by 5 p.m. that same day. The board didn't stall, they didn't negotiate. They called an emergency vote, and it was unanimous. No golden parachute, no press conference, just a terse press release. Effective immediately, Don Halpern has stepped down. By 5:12, his name had been scrubbed from the company's website. By 5:30, the SEC had formally opened an investigation, and by the next morning, they were already requesting internal documentation. It didn't stop there. Hannah filed for divorce before the sun came up. Aaron and I had helped her prep the night before. Documentation, photos, transcripts, timestamps. The court granted a restraining order within 24 hours, citing 12 separate incidents of psychological or physical abuse. She didn't flinch once in front of the judge. The woman who once showed up looking like she was made of cracked glass now stood 10 feet tall. As for Jared's tech, that landed exactly where it should have. We cut a deal with a mid-sized transport firm based out of Columbus, one that had a clean reputation and leadership that actually gave a damn about doing things right. They paid fair market value and gave Jared full visibility into implementation. The final deal came out to $6.1 million. Jared called me that night and said, I think my daughter's going to get the best care in the country now. I didn't cry, but something close bubbled up. I got job offers after that. Lots of them. Head of strategy, VP of logistics. Even a consulting pitch from a federal compliance agency. One of them offered to fly me out to DC first class just to pick my brain. I turned them all down. I didn't want a job. I wanted purpose. So Jared and I started our own firm, Pivot Integrity Group. Small office, no suits, decent coffee. Our mission? Help creators protect their work. Help good people spot bad contracts. Help the next Cassie or Miles or Jared before someone like Don gets to them first. We had 2 clients the first month. 12 by month 3. By 6 months in, we were turning people away. That's when Hannah reached out. I want in, she said, not just with money. I've got contacts, networks, people who trust me. She wasn't wrong. Between her foundation connections and the quiet power she'd always kept under wraps, she opened doors we didn't even know existed. Within a year, we were helping build whistleblower frameworks inside corporate compliance teams. We weren't just reacting anymore. We were changing things. One afternoon, an envelope showed up at the office. No return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Typed, I underestimated you. No name, no signature. But we knew. That was all Don ever sent. No apology. No threats. Just 5 words that probably hurt him more than any lawsuit or article ever could. I never wrote back. Last I heard, he was teaching part-time at a community college business program in Kentucky. Guest lectures on strategic operations and navigating public scrutiny. A man who once ran a $900 million company, now grading freshman essays about supply chain disruptions. Funny how things play out. People think revenge is fire, something hot, loud, explosive. But this was quiet, clean, and permanent. I think that's the part Don never understood. The real damage doesn't come from someone yelling at you across a table. It comes from the silence after you leave, from the people who stop answering your calls, from the nameplate being taken off your door, from the world deciding it's done with you. He broke people for years. All we did was show the world the truth, and finally, that was enough.